What did the IDF do?
I don't know.
When a wonderful voice for good, a Christian woman, a Christian Palestinian, and an American citizen, Shireen Abu Akleh, was murdered as she was on her way to one of these refugee camps. She had a press vest on. She had a press helmet on. She was shot in the neck so that she could be assassinated. Okay? This was a major issue. They wanted to do. Sorry, this is really fucked up. They went to her funeral and beat the shit out of people and ripped the Palestinian flag off of her. Palestinians can't have a moment of peace in this fucking world. They can't even mourn the dead. Sorry. The IDF went in and beat the shit out of the Palestinians that were mourning her at her funeral, that were holding her casket, and ripped the Palestinian flag off of her casket. How is that allowed? How can that continue? How do you not see that? That's in the West Bank. This is a Christian woman. This is not a Muslim. This is not Hamas. This is a journalist that was beloved in the Muslim world. And she was assassinated for speaking out and trying to shine a light on the atrocities.
This is why people are going after Hasan. So I said in my last video, or maybe a few videos ago, Richie Torres, who is a representative in Congress representing New York, a district in New York, released a letter targeting Hasan for anti-Semitism. And in that same letter that had about 3 pages dedicated to Hasan, he had 2 sentences, one of which was dedicated to Myron Gaines from Fresh and Fit, and the other dedicated towards Sneeko. And so when 90% of your letter is targeting Hasan and you claim to be fighting anti-Semitism with this letter, that really gives the game away that you're targeting pro-Palestinian voices rather than true anti-Semitic voices. And I just wanted to show this clip because this is why Hasan is getting targeted so much. He is an actual really good voice for pro-Palestinian causes. This was recorded on October 12th, 2023, 5 days after the October 7th terrorist attacks. And we can see Ethan has a pretty nuanced understanding of the issue. Let's take a look.
Just say that on camera.
Yeah. This guy has to say.
To my dick!
What do you think the response should be from Netanyahu and the military to Gaza?
Kill all Palestinians! All of them! Now,
So, like, that's crazy, obviously. Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
The confidence
barbaric.
to just say that on camera.
Yeah.
I mean, why would he feel...
There is a level of comfort in saying that,
Yeah.
more so than saying...
What, kill all Israelis?
Yeah,
kill all Jews?
Israelis.
Yeah, of course.
There's definitely way more
He's like
acceptable
no
thing to say.
hesitation there, right into the
somehow.
camera.
Yeah.
So this was from the same episode, 5 days after the October 7th attack, and Ethan has a nuanced enough view to understand that Islamophobia is much more mainstream and accepted than anti-Semitism. This is after the biggest terror attack on Jewish people since, they say, the Holocaust. Let's take a look at Ethan. This was 2 weeks ago, so about a year after that first clip.
Ethan is very frustrated and very emotional in this moment, but doesn't recognize that, like, perhaps a Lebanese woman who's a hijabi in the United States of America could also be very emotional in this exact same moment. You know what I mean? Like, that's what's so, and the reality of the matter is anti-Semitism is an unacceptable form of bigotry, whereas Islamophobia is a very acceptable form of bigotry. So being the bigger person in this situation, regardless of your feelings.
So anyway, and God forbid you actually read the chat. But what I'm hearing, frankly, is that anti-Semitism is not really an issue. And so you shouldn't, your complaints are less equal than Frogan's complaints, because Islamophobia is more serious than anti-Semitism. Despite, by the way, the fact that, as I pointed out, in reality, or not the opposite, because there is Islamophobia, but like this claim that anti-Semitism doesn't exist because everybody knows it wrong, as I perceiving it, is absolutely false. I've never seen more open
So again, Hasan did not say that anti-Semitism does not exist. He said that it is much more unacceptable than Islamophobia. And this kind of gets into the idea of systems of power and how the systems of power in this country see anti-Semitism as unacceptable, whereas there are many systems of power in America and across the world that not only see Islamophobia as acceptable, but those systems are geared towards Islamophobia, where you have so much media coverage kind of demonizing Arab people because of geopolitical interests that the governments that fund these media companies because they want to propagate these interests. And so you can really see a decline in Ethan's understanding of this situation. And maybe this is a symptom of being away from someone who does political analysis like Hasan for so long, and being fed these constant out of context clips that you will find all throughout the H3H3 subreddit, which we know Ethan just peruses pretty much nonstop. He's always stealing content from there, responding to people on there. I think this is a result of a year-long campaign to demonize Hasan, show him in an anti-Semitic light, and because of his advocacy of pro-Palestinians. Why has no one really gone after Hasan for being anti-Semitic before the October 7th attacks? Well, he wasn't advocating too hard for the Palestinians until the genocide started happening. Obviously, you're going to advocate for someone even harder when they're getting genocided. And again, this is why you're getting so much attention on Hasan. And I think that this is really we're seeing the effects of a year-long propaganda campaign, pro-Israeli propaganda campaign on Ethan, someone who's not super politically tuned in, but he will see some political stuff every now and then on his timeline, and that kind of pretty vile clip chimping that Ethan is exposed to turned him from this position where he says, oh yeah, anti-Semitism is much less commonplace than Islamophobia. People are much less comfortable spouting out open anti-Semitism than they are about Islamophobia, to this, where when Hasan says Islamophobia is accepted, anti-Semitism is unacceptable, Ethan says, well, you're saying that anti-Semitism doesn't matter. So you can really see this downfall of Ethan Klein here. And that takes me to this video. So this was a few days ago, the H3 podcast's most recent episode at the time of this recording. And Ethan brings on an employee who is a Ukrainian refugee to do a hit piece on Hasan's talking points on Russia and Ukraine. And at the end, I'm going to rewind this, but at the end of this whole hit piece, we do get this little exchange, and hopefully
for years.
this will work.
Like, we should vote and we should endorse and we should create local movements, local political movements, like AB Dad does, like everyone else does locally, and Hasan should encourage that as well.
Yeah. And I agree, it's not like a competition of what's worse.
Yes.
But in regards to and I'm glad to hear your opinion on it, but him talking about the comparison of deaths and children, it's like this overarching thing that I feel like as Muslims or Arabs, I know Hassan's not Arab, but we just have this feeling of like, we've had this feeling like people just don't give a fuck about us. Like, and I'm sure, you're feeling the same right now.
I know that feeling.
But yeah, just on that one point, the comparison between the two conflicts, like everyone was, from my point of view, everyone's up in arms initially about Ukraine and not so much about what was going on in Palestine.
But that's not,
again, it's not a comparison thing, but I'm saying that's,
I completely agree.
So just one point here, AB said initially everyone was so up in arms about Ukraine, not so much about Israel-Palestine. The initially matters a lot because we have seen this gradual increase in support, this grassroots kind of groundswell of support in favor of being pro-Palestine, as we've just seen more and more disgusting images coming out of this genocide. And I think that initially does matter a lot. People had to do a lot of work, a lot of kind of deprogramming to get to this position where now we are seeing a lot of support for Palestine.
Yes.
the sentiment.
I guess we're in different circles because online, what I see, because I'm more involved with leftist politics, I see the opposite. I feel like
I did see a turn in Ukrainian support in last year, and especially when Trump started running for president, and he's weird. Every time they did an interview with him, he brought the number up.
So this was pretty gross from Ethan, talking about how his producer AB points out that a lot of people were extremely anti-Palestinian, and Ethan's like, well, I don't see that.
I'm saying that's
I completely agree. Yes.
The sentiment.
I guess we're in different circles because online, what I see, because I'm more involved with leftist politics, I see the opposite. I feel like
I did see a turn in.
That's a crazy thing to say, saying that there was the same amount of support, or he said the opposite. So he's saying we're seeing much more support for Palestinians than we are seeing for Ukraine. And maybe that's the case now, but once again, Ethan is completely forgetting what his opinion was 5 days after the October 7th attack, where he played a guy that openly called for the death of all Palestinians. We still get people openly calling for the death of all Palestinians who are accepted in mainstream media. Do we need to go over the guy who just talked to Mehdi Hasan saying, well, I hope your beeper doesn't go off, knowing after Mehdi was saying that he was pro-Palestinian, basically saying, oh, well, you're a terrorist then, and you potentially could get executed by Israel. Do we need to talk about Ben Shapiro just a few weeks ago saying he not only supports, but he lauds all of the actions that Israel has done against Palestinians and against Gaza? We still get people openly calling for the genocide of all Palestinians. I've never heard anyone say that Russia should invade Ukraine. At the most, you'll get people disingenuously say, oh, well, Ukraine should just try to get peace with Russia, and the United States should stop funding this forever war that we're creating in Eastern Europe. And that's disingenuous. I think the people that make that argument know that if the United States stops funding Ukraine, Russia will just take it over. But there is a difference in saying we should try to get peace between Ukraine and Russia and saying, yeah, we should kill all Palestinians and just let Israel take it over. In fact, we have an entire political party, the conservatives, saying that Israel needs to finish the job, do the final solution on the Palestinians, just get rid of them, basically. Trump is openly acknowledging that he's taking bribes to allow Israel to annex the West Bank and Gaza. We have an entire political party calling for the eradication of a people. Donald Trump using Palestinian as a slur against his opponents. And Ethan says that, oh, well, I disagree. I think that there's more support for Palestine than there is for Ukraine. This is serious stuff. We're talking about the dehumanization of not only an entire ethnic group in terms of Palestinians, but an entire quote-unquote race of people, because races aren't real, but in the American public imagination of what race is, we see Arabs as just lesser. And when you have an entire political party talking about how Arabs are pretty much just gross and they need to be eradicated by the white Jews that we've installed in in Israel. And that is a big reason why America is supporting Israel, because they're white people. We can identify ourselves in them. That's why we need to have a group of white people that, they're more civilized than the Arabs that were living there. So we operate on the same wavelength as the people there. So it's like, white man to white man, we got this covered. Why couldn't America support like Egypt there that was controlling the Suez Canal? Why couldn't they do that? America and Britain had to install white people in the Middle East because they're the only people we can trust. So it is racism. It is anti-Arab. And we have this entire political party that sees, Arabs as lesser people. And that's not even starting to talk about the Democrats that also see it that way. They're just not open about it. Oh, they say that they support Israel's sovereignty, but they're not actually going to, give. They're not going to say the quiet part out loud like the Republicans do. But they're not going to really give Palestine any kind of rights at all. We're going to build a pier so that we can ship in aid, rather than just telling our client state, Israel, to just cut it the fuck out and let people eat. It's insane, man. It's insane. The Democrats are so cucked on this issue. And then when you get Ethan saying that, this war between Ukraine and Russia, where both parties are supporting Ukraine because both parties are anti-Russia, but there's like a few people that aren't supporting Ukraine. There's a few Republicans that say we shouldn't support Ukraine because they're like deficit fearmongers or whatever. They cry about the deficit all the time. But I'm not seeing it on my timeline. So I disagree. I think there's more support for Ukraine than there is for Palestine, or I think there's less support for Ukraine than there is for Palestinians. So I'm going to bring on this person basically to like shit on Hasan because he's not sufficiently pro-Ukraine enough. And then when my producer brings up the idea that, one reason why Hasan is focusing more on Palestine is because we feel like the media doesn't give fair coverage to Palestine. Ethan's like, well, I actually think there's more support for Palestine than there is Ukraine. Pretty gross stuff, and it just shows how unserious Ethan is. Anyway, I feel like I've made my point. I don't want to harp on this too much, but I did just want to point that out because it is gross. Let's get into this. So in this episode, I covered and made fun of Ethan and Gila kind of getting triggered by Dan Clancy's lackluster and lazy response to the Richie Torres letter. And that was hilarious. That letter was a joke. But this is a long-ass episode, and as it being such a long episode, I split this up into multiple parts. And I think that this is going to be... This is just my intro, by the way. So this is going to be an extremely long episode. I'm thinking maybe like 2.5 hours. So hang out, grab some food, grab some drinks, just like pop in an AirPod at work or something. Put me on 1.5 times speed. I'm going to be playing the content that I'm reacting to at 1.25 just to save a little bit of time. But still, this is going to be long because I'm not just watching this. I also have some other additional context videos for us to watch. So let's get this started immediately.
Please. Galia works on the podcast and on TeddyFresh. With the podcast, you guys do like research, right?
Okay, so I did watch this before. I'm going to skip past Galia's history and her story about escaping Ukraine and Russia. If you're interested in that, go into this, watch it. It lasts for about like a good 20 minutes, but we can skip that. Essentially, she leaves Ukraine, leaves Russia. She does talk about how there are Russian settlers coming into her region of Ukraine. Her family lived in the eastern regions of Ukraine. Russian settlers would come in. They would give Russian money for basically the goods and household items that her family had, and so her family had to sell that off to them. They would just take over people's businesses, And something that I do want to point out before I just skip over this entirely is that there are so many similarities between Israel settling Gaza and Russia settling the eastern parts of Ukraine, sending in families to live in houses and just occupy the territory, and like displacing the people that already live there. The major difference between Russia's colonization tactics and Israel's colonization tactics is that Russia doesn't define itself as being a ethno-state, whereas Israel does. Israel's defines itself as having a Jewish supermajority in terms of being ethnically Jewish in the country. And so the difference in their colonization tactics is that Russia will try to indoctrinate and do a bit of a cultural genocide to the people that it takes over, such as eliminating their native languages, making them go to Russian schools, learn Russian propaganda, spend and get paid with by Russian money, whereas Israel will just ethnically displace everyone or kill them, pretty much. So that's the major difference, and it is funny that Ethan is kind of, doesn't make a single comment on it. Let's start here.
Really cute dog. Our favorite son, the only son that we have. But
anyway, Galia gets out of Ukraine, moves to Canada, and then about a year ago, she starts working for Ethan Klein as a Teddy Fresh employee and a researcher for the podcast.
he doesn't
Notably,
have
this
international
is the
documents, and the way
second time
that
she
you
was
only
on
can cross
camera.
the border is if you
She was
have
on a few days
documents
ago
for your
before
dog.
this.
And there were no updates whether you can go to the border. So from Kyiv to the border, it's like a 10-hour drive. I would say like an 8 to 10-hour drive. And just for us to go somewhere from our house, it was like too weird. So we stayed for the whole day. My boyfriend brought some food for us to have. We were sheltering in the parking of our apartment building. All the people gathered, brought all the mattresses that are still there. But my parents were really, really happy when they could buy toilet paper. And they were like, we bought toilet paper today. And it's it costs 20 amounts of regular, yeah, it's 20x the cost because all the Russians are selling it to you now, and or people who are conceding to them. Yeah, it's it's really crazy. But the worst part was medication and getting insulin to my grandma, getting everything. There's no medication. There's nothing. My uncle, who's a doctor, couldn't help anyone getting any medications in that city. So we kind of and there were even no imported medications to Ukraine. But
guys just assimilate and become Russian? What's
yeah, they are saving us, Ethan.
That's the narrative?
Yeah. They're saving us from Nazis, of course.
Right.
The whole denazification of the country is happening right now, and we're in the midst of it.
So that's their whole justification, that Ukraine is Nazis. Do they even pretend there's a pretense for invasion, or they're just these guys are Nazis, let's get them?
Is it not enough?
So again, another similarity between Russia's colonization of Ukraine and Israel's colonization of Gaza. Israel will give the pretext of we're coming in to eliminate Hamas. So actually everyone's got to move out of northern Gaza into southern Gaza while we clear Hamas. And then once it's cleared, you can come back. But, they said Hamas was cleared. People moved back. Oh, look at that. Hamas is there again. We got to clear it out again. Russia, there's so many Nazis in Ukraine. We got to come in and denazify Ukraine. Same exact justification. We got to get rid of this extreme group. Come in the process of getting rid of the extreme group. Oh, look at that. Well, it's kind of our land now, right? And especially in Gaza, we got rid of everyone else. And Ethan is he's probably not even thinking of Israel and Gaza right now, which it's kind of funny because his whole Hasan hatred train started from this, and now he's gone so far down this path that he's kind of just bringing up old clips of Hasan on completely unrelated issues to bash him that way. And at this point, I would not be surprised if next week we see him talking about the Hasan clip where he said America deserves 9/11. He's pretty much on that much of a Hasan derangement syndrome.
Usually there's some provocation.
I think he's a Nazi. Let's go get him. That's how it works, yeah. If you have a lot of money, if you're one of the most powerful countries in the world, if you have nonstop just like oil money that never ends. You can do whatever you want.
Again, that's exactly what Israel does, saying that just certain people they don't like works with Hamas. We have to assassinate them. Recently, they put a hit out on 6 different Palestinian journalists on the pretense that they worked for Hamas. They were part of, they like released documents that said, oh, 10 years ago you worked for Hamas, and like a 28-year-old Palestinian or like a 20-year-old Palestinian journalist would be 10. It's like, okay, you were a commander for Hamas's 2nd Battalion 10 years ago. I was 10 years old, bro.
You don't give any money to your own people. You just spend it on the war. Yeah, of course, you can do whatever you want. You nonstop just like go invade any country.
And so they offer Russian families a lot of money to move into the newly acquired territory to try to establish it?
I don't know if they offer them money. I know that, for example, I lived in an old apartment complex that we had our whole life that my granddad got, and we like lived in the same apartment all together in USSR. And like my whole kind of like part of the building, a couple of the best apartments that there are in terms of like design, like new appliances, they're already filled with Russians who are living there. Like right now, like in the summer of 2022, 4 months after, my mom was calling me and she was like, there is no Ukrainian cars anymore. Like I can see only Russian numbers coming from like Russian plate numbers coming from different regions. Because if you look at the map, we live actually by the sea, which is like a great, awesome, one of the best resorts in, my town is one of the best resorts in Ukraine besides Crimea and Odessa, which are also like one of the main interests of Russians. So people consider if you, for example, live somewhere in an extremely cold area in Russia, a lot of them just moved. For example, their husband is serving in the army there, or like husbands moved their families, or like some random people just came. I don't know, like we've never talked to them. And yeah, so right now, my city is fully occupied by Russian army. On September 27th of 2022, which was like 6 months after the invasion, they did a referendum in my town, which is like...
What does it mean?
Referendum is like a poll whenever you ask you like, would you like to be a part of Russia? And it's like a yes or no, but they have a rifle to your head. Like, so like, what would you choose? And of course, the only people who even went to that poll or like election, or like, it's a referendum. The only people who even went there were people who were pro-Russian, or like, I don't know, like, it's totally rigged. And then they just like announced that from this point, all of this occupied region is a part of Russia. So officially in the mind of Putin right now, we're a part of Russia in all like official terms. And they started handing out Russian passports to everyone. And after that point, the only way you could, for example, keep your apartment, keep your vehicle, keep your anything that you have, like a garage, is by re-signing with a Russian passport. So everyone who lives in the area needs to get a Russian passport in order to keep their home, keep their car, keep their like anything, business. Oh, and on the first day of invasion, some people walked into my dad's business and just said that it's not his anymore.
Were they Russian?
Yeah.
Wow.
Just the first day of the invasion, they were that quick with it?
Like,
what was the business?
My dad.
Yeah, so this is just classic colonization techniques, giving them like your country's version of whatever their old country was. So your country's version of their passport, your country's version of license plate, money, language, just pretty classic stuff all the way back.
Are Russian.
Yeah. And like, for example, the neighbors, my parents' neighbors, they still don't have a Russian passport and they still refuse to get it. But they are like, still get bombings in that city as well, but they're like safer. They feel welcomed by their region. There is a lot of kind of like their understanding of what's happening, because for the first year they were just like piling up boxes for the moment when they're gonna go back. They were collecting all the boxes for the stuff so they could go back, and they could hear it like almost every week. Oh, so the war is almost over. The war is almost over. Just like 3 more weeks, 2 more weeks. We just need to wait. I heard something, and it kept like the deadline kept pushing away from them. And then like a couple of months ago, I got a call from my mom, and she was like, I guess we're never coming back. I guess this is our like next place that we need to settle in. So yeah, that's kind of the story of my family and me and my boyfriend. My boyfriend is not under the draft law. He is like one of exceptions. So his mother has a disability, and that's why he is kind of like a caretaker for her, and that's why he could leave the country. But all of his classmates, he went to like a tech university, which is engineering position where like all of the guys were studying. Half of his class are at war already. We already like did a few fundraisers for a few guys who lost legs, arms, everything, and just like were in a horrible condition. Yeah, it's happening to everyone. It's happening, I don't know, everyone has their own story. Like I said, this is just mine. But like if you would ask anyone around, it's insane for everyone. And when I escaped, when we fled to Poland first, we fled right after my parents got to the safer place. We fled. We sold all of our stuff because we were like, okay, we're never getting back because like we're in our 20s. We want to start building a family. There's no way we could build it in like unsafe place right now. And it's economical disaster. Everything is going down. Like your currency is dropping every week. You're just like, and everything is in dollar anyway. So like you're just losing money every day. And we were thinking like, we sold all of the stuff we had. I made a spreadsheet with every single country in the world that was doing programs for Ukrainians that you could actually enter because we have a weak-ass passport. We cannot go anywhere just like, oh my God, let's go to USA, good job. Or like, this is not happening. And Canada gave a really...
So yeah, this is pretty sad stuff. Just again, to point out, Palestinians literally can't leave. They're being pushed out into the desert by Israel. Palestinians can't do fundraisers because they are getting their internet shut off by Israel. And Palestinians just straight up do not have the support that Ukrainians have. They do not have countries that are willing to accept them. And again, as much chatter as leftists are making online about how we stand with Palestine, and I know that Ethan is surrounded by that, he's inundated with it, and it makes him feel like there's more support for Palestinians than there is for Ukrainians. The fact of the matter is, there is so much more structural support for Ukraine and Ukrainian refugees to the point that we can't even get aid into Palestine because Israel has done a complete blockade on Gaza, preventing any kind of humanitarian help in. They're starving people out. They're blowing up vaccination clinics, killing people trying to get polio vaccines because polio is coming back in Gaza. And as much as Ethan says that, well, I think there's more support for Palestine than there is for Ukraine at the moment, it doesn't matter if he's seeing it more online. The fact is, our structural institutional support is there for Ukraine, and it's just non-existent for Palestine, even to the extent that we send humanitarian food, medical supplies, doctors into Palestine. Israel's preventing that from actually making it into Gaza. And they're killing doctors. They're killing humanitarian aid workers. They're preventing trucks from entering. And so it's just not even a comparison that can be made. So I'm not going to really talk that much more about comparing Ukraine to Palestine because I feel like I can't really make my point better than what I have. I just really want to point out how uninformed and ignorant Ethan Klein is on this subject and how much he's in his own little bubble of his Reddit, his Instagram, the comments on his podcasts, comment sections on YouTube. And he really needs to do more research, educate himself on this issue. I've said it before. I think he needs to bring in experts, academics that have actually studied the power dynamics in Palestine and Israel. And as if he's going to be dipping his toes into these more political issues, it was fine when he had Hasan with him because Hasan was the one who was actually talking politics and Ethan could just dance around and make jokes like a clown. And he wasn't really responsible for anything. But now Ethan is the one. This is Ethan taking his interests into these political issues Now, to be fair, I mean, not really fair, but I do want to point out that I don't think he's genuinely interested in Ukraine. I think he's just bringing his employee on that, again, has been employed to the H3 podcast and Ethan's clothing outlet for about a year and a half, and she's just now coming on to give her story about being a Ukrainian refugee and how people are settling Ukraine. It's obviously because he's has this crusade against Hassan, so I don't think he's genuinely interested in Ukraine. But if he's going to be covering these political issues, and he's claiming it's purely for the politics of it, he wants to bring someone on to tell their story, which I think is bullshit. But he's claiming that, so he should bring on people that actually can talk about this from a well-educated perspective. That's my 2 cents, because obviously Ethan isn't willing to do the research and educate himself. So why not bring someone on that actually can talk about it?
Amazing program for actually giving you a work visa and ability to work in Canada and be like a normal human being there, and which I'm really thankful for. So that's why we chose
And criminals.
fascist, Nazis, work criminals. Those are all the ones that are getting paid to do it, and they're like happy to do it and enjoying their lives every day. And yeah, go out of their houses. It's an exciting experience. I encourage everyone to learn about Bucha, to learn about Kharkiv region, to learn about Mariupol, because I don't know what those fucks did to Mariupol now, because like they're starting rebuilding it and saying like it's all good, but they erased 800,000 people city from like to the ground. Like, not happening. I'm sorry. There's like everything is bombed. I'm sorry. There are like so many cities that are erased to the ground. Like, yeah.
Just one more point on the comparison of Israel and Russia. I really want to stress that what Israel is doing right now is not exceptional by any means. We've seen this time and time again. It is simply colonization. On October 7th, I was saying it to my friends. This is an example of colonization, where you get this systemic structural violence, building, and you will get these explosions of resistant violence, like what Hamas did, like so many different attacks from marginalized people. And then the people that are in charge of these structural power systems will point to those explosions of resistance and say, see, these people are animals. They are so violent. We need to double down on our efforts of marginalizing them and of oppressing them. And so October 7th isn't anything new. It is just a part of a pattern of oppression. That's pretty much what it is. I can't really explain it more than that. And what Israel is doing to Palestine isn't anything new. We're seeing Russia do the exact same thing to Ukraine, where they take over Crimea. And, they didn't have that explosion of violence, but they still use the idea that Ukraine is full of extremists, these Nazis that are infesting Ukraine, and Russia needs to go in and civilize this nation of radicals. That's their excuse. And we're seeing the exact same tactics of colonization from Russia and from Israel, both on the propaganda front, Russia doing a ton of propaganda in terms of, saying that it's NATO, saying that it's actually Russian people living in Ukraine. That's why we annexed Crimea. Israel doing the propaganda, saying how Hamas is so extreme. And then also the settler ideas where Russia will send in people, Israel will send in people. And then once there have been people living there, they say, well, we can't give that land back because that's inhumane. We have our people living there. We also need to send in soldiers to protect those people. And then, oh, look at that. The soldiers took over another house of extremists. They took over another house of Nazis. They took over another house of Hamas. Might as well send settlers into that house too. And that's the way that we've seen colonization play out pretty much throughout the world forever, kind of. I'm sure this pattern of colonization even occurred during the Roman times. And it always has a different level of ethnic cleansing to an extent, but it's always going to displace people, and it's always going to take place through violence from the state. So again, just endless parallels between Ukraine and Russia here, and it is doing a disservice to Ethan's audience to talk about this without also bringing up Israel and Palestine, because that's how this whole thing started. Ethan started down this path because he's getting criticized for not talking about Palestine enough. And again, we're seeing Ethan continue to not talk about Palestine, and whenever he does talk about Palestine, he puts it down. Gila saying that Gila making fun of people for not voting for Harris because of the genocide, and the fact that they don't want to vote because both candidates are supporting genocide, saying how stupid they are for that, saying how, oh, that's going to hurt your cause, like, separating herself from the cause of fighting genocide. She's just separating herself from that. Ethan saying that pro-Palestinian movements are being anti-Semitic because they're fighting against Zionism, and Ethan says there's no difference between Zionists and Jews. And then also saying that, like in this episode, the clip I already showed, where he said, actually, there's more support for Palestinians than there is for Ukraine, which just shows how uneducated and ignorant Ethan is on this subject. And so you do see kind of a willingness to at least touch the topic, brush against the topic, but then whenever they actually do talk about Palestine, they are putting it in a pretty negative light, I would say.
It's just, I know that this is like a really hard topic for everyone to get, because this is the talking point of this election. And like a lot of people get to decide their sides of the story, and like they are like telling their side, but I get to say my side. And I encourage you to learn about those things, because they are horrible. Like whatever those people did, this is just like insane. Russian army, I know Russian army is being drafted as well. So there are people who are not willing to go to war, but they are going to war. But there are a lot of paid combat units that are going like on the front lines, and that are doing this like incredible,
and criminals,
fascist Nazis, war criminals. Those are all the ones that are getting paid to do it, and they're like happy to do it and enjoying their lives every day. And yeah, overall, war has been going for 10 years since I was 19. I'm 30 now. It's still going. Sometimes I have a fear that it's going to go like for my whole life, and I'm not going to see the end of it. But yeah, that's what's been going on. And I would always, let me look at my notes if I missed anything.
So just one thing to kind of bring up here, like she has a pretty amazing story. Also the story of how she started working with Ethan is kind of funny. She just like sent him an email of some research that she did on a subject, and he's like, hey, do you want to work for me? Just one comment. There's not really any prescription here, right? It's not like they need to raise awareness for Ukraine to get more support for Ukraine. The United States has sent billions of dollars worth of weaponry into Ukraine. Let's see, do I have the specific amounts? Here we go. U.S. security with Ukraine. Today, we have provided more than $64 billion in military assistance since Russia launched its premeditated, unprovoked, and brutal full-scale invasion of Ukraine on February 24th, 2022. So, in 2 years, we've given $64 billion in military assistance. So it's not like, and we are seeing countries opening up their borders, giving people refugee status from Ukraine, giving people jobs, work visas, letting people come in. There's not much more of a response that we can give. Obviously, there's always going to be these Russian propagandists that are going to be attacking Ukraine, but it's not like we need to change any policies in order to support Ukrainians more, at least from kind of the West and from NATO's perspective. People that live in NATO countries can't really change anything else. So there's not really any prescriptive things that Ethan can do. So why is he bringing his Why is he bringing his employee on to talk about this? Obviously, it's because she's going to be shitting on Hasan. And we'll see that. I think that she is coming
First part
up
of the invasion
onto
must
that
have been
part.
surreal. Like, were people expecting that? Because I know in the West, a lot of people are like, "Is this going to happen? Is this not going to happen? I don't know."
I would never expect no one from my friends, workmates, no one was expecting invading Kiev. No one, like not a single person. I only know one family that kind of like was suspecting something and they did some preemptive stuff. Most of them just like, okay, we gotta get like it's called like an emergency luggage or like whatever they would call it. Like, okay, let's just let's just get like
So that was a huge criticism for Hasan, where he was so confidently saying that there's no way Russia would invade Ukraine. And a lot of people were criticizing him for that. And you can see here that even Ukrainians living on the eastern regions of Ukraine were extremely confident that Russia wouldn't do like a full-scale proper invasion into Ukraine.
Yeah.
But it's more like, okay, it's like 1% of people, I would say. But like most of people never would have imagined. Like I said, like I was worried about my region being invaded more because like that's the route that they went last time, because they want to connect Crimea to Russia, like by road. And we are like their highway to go there.
What does Putin want? Like, because it's like costing them a lot too. I heard 600,000 Russian troops died.
Yeah.
Which is unbelievable.
I mean, I don't know what he wants. He's a freak. He is like, some assistants would bring him some news that they made up, and they were like, "We're winning!" And he was like, "Yay!" And then like
sounds like the USSR. Sounds like the communist hellhole.
All right, let's try to skip to where she actually starts talking about
has been
Hasan,
happening.
because
And
I
like
think
once
we still have a lot to
Poland,
cover.
it's called "Stop Ukrainization of Poland," and it's like an official movement that's like Russian propaganda right now is doing.
Okay, so she starts to talk about Russian propaganda and the effect that it's having. Let's hear what she has to say here.
Even worse thing, the Russian propaganda in all European countries is pushing for hating Ukrainian refugees. And they're calling it, for example, in Poland, it's called Stop Ukrainization of Poland. And it's like an official movement that's like nationalistic from Poland, but it's like, it's been proven that it's funded by Russia, and it's like all against refugees.
Okay, I just searched this up. I didn't have this pre-planned. The first article that popped up when I searched anti-Ukrainian protests in Poland is this: anti-Ukrainian protests in Poland attracts no participants. A protest against the reception of Ukrainian refugees in a town near Poland's border with Ukraine at the weekend attracted no participants. Meanwhile, another event in Warsaw, at which 2 nationalist MPs spoke, drew only a small crowd. Figures from the Nationalist Confederation have in recent weeks been promoting the slogan, "Stop the Ukrainization of Poland." The party, which has long been opposed to mass immigration from Ukraine, claims that Ukrainian refugees are being given privileges not granted to Poles. Wow, have you heard that before? Living in America. On Saturday, the party promoted a march and protest in Warsaw against the threats posed by the massive influx of people from Ukraine. One of the Confederation's leaders, Grzegorz Braun, called on all Polish patriots opposed to the depolonization and Ukrainization of Poland to attend. So look, what is that, like 20 people? Less than that? On the day, between 150 and 200 people turned up, reported Gazette. Oh my God, I'm not going to try to pronounce Polish words. They have a great language, but not for American mouths. Participants also displayed banners with the logos of far-right groups, All Polish Youth, and the National Movement. Among those to speak to the crowd were Braun. Okay. So, anyway, something interesting, like Ethan has talked a lot about how leftists aren't supporting Ukraine, and you can see that the one example she gives of Russian propaganda leading to anti-Ukrainian takes is from the extreme far right. And also not to diminish Russian propaganda, but these people look like they have a history of protesting against specifically immigration from Ukraine. Yeah, you don't want to look at this. Okay, never mind. You definitely don't want to get any Ukrainian genetics into this gene pool. You kidding me? These people look like paragons of human physiology. Anyway, pretty funny that the example she gives has literally 0 attendance at one rally, and then in the other rally has 200 people, and it looks like they've been there for they've had those opinions for decades. And then the other point again is that it's not leftists that are railing against immigration and refugees coming into the country. It is right-wingers. So any kind of criticism that Ethan's going to aim at leftists for being not sufficiently pro-Ukrainian is going to be completely ridiculous. Like, all of the anti-Ukrainian stuff is from right-wingers. And I think we can get into this. So we have Hasan reacting to people coming up with ridiculous Ukrainian takes. Let's just watch this now. I think this is a good segue into this.
Christian and Russian Orthodox. So, I actually support Putin's right to protect his people and always put his people first, but also protect our Christian values.
So, again, this is Hasan, the person that Ethan is attacking for not being pro-Ukrainian enough. Let's see how he actually reacts to this.
I identify more with with Putin's Christian values than I do with Joe Biden. So, there is that. There is that there.
Bro, that's like straight up. Like, I mean, this is like the American Bund. You know what I mean? Not that I hate the fucking like the Putin is Hitler fucking shit, but like it's not actually all that different, than what historically what Americans did when we were like, yeah, let's fucking join the Nazis. Let's do the fucking Madison Square Garden. 30,000 Nazis marched on Madison Square Garden, and we're just like, yeah, no, it's sick. Like, actually pretty tight.
Christian nationalist countries also are a threat to the global.
Also, what about Ukrainians? You fucking idiot. You think they're not Christian? Like, oh, they're nationalists too. She's like, oh, actually, I'm siding with the I'm siding with the Russians on this one. Okay, well, fucking don't worry. Ukrainians are Christian too. Do you not care?
Regime, like the Luciferian regime that wants to mash everything together.
The Luciferian regime
looks out for his people.
So this is pro-Russia from the viewpoint of we need to bring Christian nationalists together. I'm supporting them because they're Christian nationalists, which is pretty funny. Let's see what Lauren Boebert has to say in Ukraine.
Yeah, dude. Give me some incredible. We got nuclear warfare coming up, on the timeline, and that's terrifying. But how about some good old-fashioned nuclear takes?
So I pray for Ukraine, and I wish them the best. They have a great president right now who's really said clearly, live free or die. He said, I don't need a right.
Yeah, no, she's like, that's why. He said, live free or die, yeah. Zelensky's really good because he's being real libertarian right now. He's got the Gadsden flag.
Give me ammunition, the fight is right here. But we also have neighbors to the north who need freedom and need to be liberated, and we need that right here at home.
Doesn't she realize
what?
That, like,
okay,
invading Canada?
I do not remember that. She said that we need to liberate Canada? That's fucking hilarious. We need to run that back.
Right here. But we also have neighbors to the north who need freedom and need to be liberated, and we need that right here at home as well.
Neighbors to her south. Doesn't she realize that, like, America invading Canada would make America the Russia of the equation and Canada the Ukraine? Like, what the f does that mean? America needs some liberation.
That's so funny because pretty much the only support we're giving Ukraine is old military weapons that are just rusting away in warehouses right now. So what she's saying, we need to use like artillery to free ourselves. She says we need to free Canada and us. That's insane. Okay, so we have a Christian nationalist, a right winger saying we can't support Ukraine because we need to liberate Canada. We need to send artillery shells to Canada. Let's see what Charlie Kirk has to say.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Give us the fucking hot takes, Charlie. Oh, he doesn't even care about the southern border. Yeah, dude, I know. It's fucking, he hasn't like Joe Biden.
Hold on, we gotta rewind this.
Stunning analysis.
U.S. southern border matters a lot more than the Ukrainian border.
Oh yeah, there we go. That's what I'm talking about.
Again,
that's what I'm talking about. Give it.
Again, a complete misunderstanding of what's happening in Ukraine. Do we need artillery shells to just like shell the U.S. southern border? It completely insane stuff.
It's the fucking hot takes, Charlie. Oh, he doesn't even care about the southern border. Yeah, dude, I know. It's fucking, he hasn't like, Joe Biden hasn't fucking killed enough Haitian migrants in his administration. So that's, we got to deal with that, dude. What the fuck, right?
I'm more worried about how the cartels are deliberately trying to infiltrate our country than
some prescient stuff from Hasan here, talking about Haitian migrants and talking about that Nazi MSG rally. And then we see both of those things kind of make a resurgence in the Republican side, where they had a kind of a Nazi-ish MSG rally a few weeks ago. and they have this whole crazy story about Haitian migrants.
Dispute 5,000 miles away, cities we can't pronounce, places that most Americans can't find on a map. Now, I'm not defending the actions of dictators halfway across the world. What I'm saying, though, is when your own country is falling apart, I don't want to hear lectures about why we need to send our troops halfway across the world when we are being invaded.
Okay, so I do want to come back to this clip because there's another video that I need to cover before we can go back to finish the H3 podcast. And in that video, Ethan Klein does not understand how media manufactures support for causes. And Hasan is trying to make the point on an old Leftovers episode that we only care about Ukraine because the media that we consume is telling us to care about Ukraine. And Ethan says, well, Ukraine is actually important, so why wouldn't Americans and Europeans to support it? And it's so funny because Charlie Kirk is like, we can't even pronounce the city names. They're 5,000 miles away. Why would we care about it? It's so funny. Like, this is kind of the dumb American view on something, right? Kiev, Sevastopol. I can't even pronounce that. And I did mispronounce it. It's Kiev, not Kiev. What am I doing?
The conservative movement must be very clear that we're going to talk about things that matter to our voters, matter to American families. And one of the things that we must be very clear about is how the lockdown,
doing systemic racism. That's what we need to be doing, okay? We need to be talking about, and we also need to be doing systemic racism. Critical race theory, more like critical racism theory. That's what we need in our schools. I love conservatives trying to talk about this from the incredibly narrow framework.
Again, another sign that Americans don't actually care about Ukraine. At least right-wing conservatives don't care about it. And what Hasan said is kind of true there. He's like, we can't worry about Ukraine because we need to worry about our southern border. Crazy shit. Candace Owens. All right, let's just listen to two more of these and then we'll call it. Okay, Candace Owens and CPAC attendees. I need to listen to that one.
That they have. Pretty soon you'll be able to get a vaccine with that will prevent war. Then you'll find out it doesn't actually prevent war or stop wars from spreading worldwide, but 2 doses and can make wars less severe. So it may, with the 4th dose, if it were our eyes, you'll be less likely to die. Wait, is she saying she wouldn't take that vaccine? Because if that was the case and like you were less likely to...
Okay, that's actually pretty sweet. You get a 2-for-1. You get anti-vax, anti-Ukraine war. So great stuff from Candace Owens there. Doesn't even make sense, but pretty cool, pretty cool. CPAC attendees. Let's listen to this.
There was some other shit going on. Oh, CPAC guests blame poor leadership for Ukraine invasion.
Well, unfortunately, this is the result of poor leadership, in my opinion. I don't think this would have happened under the previous administration. Russia has made military maneuvers under 4 of the last 5 presidents. Guess which one they didn't test their boundaries with? It was President Trump. And so now we're having to pick up the pieces on the back end. And so the response is, well, what does the U.S. do? Well, you know, what's going to happen? Well, the response is we shouldn't have let it happen to begin with.
I think if Trump was still in office, we never would have gotten to this point. But unfortunately, we are where we're at.
Like, what do you say to this?
It's tough because my brother is actually in the Marines right now, and I hear that we are deploying troops at the moment, so it makes me nervous. I think that we should have somewhat of a military presence given the circumstances, but not that I agree with it, but it is what it is.
Yeah, we should put some fucking Marines in Kyiv. That's what we should be doing. I don't understand. Why won't we send them goddamn Marines down there? Fucking deal with it. Like, first of all, no disrespect, but all disrespect. You know, we gotta make America Florida. I love this.
So again, like, all of this anti-Ukraine stuff is coming from conservatives. And maybe you can find some leftists that will be like, "Oh, I don't like NATO. We shouldn't force Ukraine into NATO." But we didn't force Ukraine into NATO, and they were still invaded. Let's continue on this.
Or like they're gonna take your taxes, all the bullet points that you see in America everywhere. I'm not taking anyone taxes. I'm paying taxes to Canada, and like I'm a taxpayer. I don't take any.
So this is funny. She's like defending herself from just classic talking points that are anti-immigrant, that you're going to be mooching off of welfare and we're going to be paying for you. You're going to take our jobs.
What would you call them? Like, not donations, but like any
funding.
help, any help,
Welfare.
Any welfare. I'm not on that. I'm helping my friends that also moved to Canada, like whenever they need any help. No one is doing that. We're not like, our goal is not to
leech, right?
To leech on anyone's money and then just go back to your own country. We're here, we're paying taxes, we're paying sales tax on everything. We're just like everyone else around. And like, for people, I've met a couple of people in Canada who were like, "Oh, you're from Ukraine, or like whenever you hear my accent. And Vancouver is incredibly liberal city, and it's like it's an insane amount of support there. But even there, you get like a couple of times like a weird look, and
you
then
walk a little too far left, then
Yeah.
you start becoming pro-Russia. It's very weird.
It's like
Or like anti-Ukraine.
Bro, what? She's literally describing right-wing anti-immigration tendencies. She's like, oh yeah, all of these right-wingers are discriminating against me because I'm a refugee, and they think that I'm going to be a welfare queen, mooch off of the system, not pay any taxes, get special privileges because I'm a Ukrainian refugee. And I have so much support in Vancouver, and it's a very liberal city, hence the support. And then, but there are still some people, this is insane, dude. She's like, there are still some people that will hear my foreign accent and then look at me weird, like, you know, anti-immigration. It's a liberal city, but there's still some people that discriminate against me. And then Ethan's like, liberal city, but some discrimination. Could it be that it's the right-wingers that are discriminating against her? Or could it be that the city is liberal and there are some extreme leftists that hate Ukrainians because of the geopolitical implications of supporting Ukraine against Russia and how that will strengthen NATO's claim that it's a force for good in the world? And it's these lefties that are actually giving her the evil eye when they hear that she's a Ukrainian. It's not that it's these fucking conservatives that hate immigrants and that hate all immigrants across the board, not specifically Ukrainians. In Ethan's mind, it's once you go far left enough, you start hating Ukraine and loving Russia. So these people that she's talking about, that she's just described the entire ideology of hating immigration, I'm going to forget that. I'm going to forget the lefties that are historically pro-immigration and the group that is historically anti-immigration, which is conservatives. I'm going to say that it's Hasan fans because Hasan is pro-Russia. Bro, Ethan is so fucking brain broken, man. And I'm so done giving him any kind of charity. Like I started off this whole series of me covering this stupid drama, very charitable to Ethan, really trying to understand where he's coming from, understand how he can kind of work himself out of this, like by talking to experts and stuff, talking even to Hasan and Sam Cedar, just talking to his friends that aren't in his immediate bubble. Even just get away from online for a while, stop reading the comment sections. But I'm really done with this. His media literacy is so low. His understanding of what people are telling him is extremely low. He'll just hear one thing and then it will get twisted like he's refracting light in his mind. Like his head is a fucking piece of glass and the light comes in one way and then just gets refracted into all sorts of different random colors that was not anything of what it was supposed to be going into him. Like, he's a really fucking stupid guy.
Why? Also, shout out to H3 Snark.
Just gonna rewind this one more time.
It's I've met a couple of people in Canada who were like, oh, you're from Ukraine, or like whenever you hear my accent. And Vancouver is incredibly liberal city, and it's like
incredibly liberal.
It's an insane amount of support there. But even there, you get like a couple of times like a weird look, and
you
then
walk a little too far left, then you start becoming pro-Russia. It's very weird.
It's like
or like anti-Ukraine.
What?
Bro, I can't. It's so dumb. She's like, yeah, all of these people that hate immigrants, you know, are doing this anti-Ukrainian stuff. And then sometimes I meet those people when I'm in this incredibly liberal city. It's rare because the city's so liberal. It's so progressive. But sometimes I'll still meet some of these like conservative anti-immigrant people. And Ethan's like, you walk a little bit too far left. And all of a sudden, you hate Russia. Bro, where are you getting that from? She didn't say anything remotely like that. She hasn't given a single, like I've been skipping around a lot, but she hasn't given a single example of leftists being anti-Ukraine. It's crazy.
Also, shout out to H3 Snark. I saw your post about me, and the amount of you weird little freaks who think that I'm like pro-Israel from whatever I said on the pod before, which I've never even talked about that topic.
So
you're like so insane. I'm completely pro-Palestine.
You've never talked about the Israel.
I've never even mentioned anything. Like I've been here for 5 minutes, but like I'm already pro-Israel and IDF, and I'm like, I don't know, like almost killing babies. Like what the fuck are you saying? Like whenever I see any stories from that AB puts on his stories, that's insane. That's insane, like that anyone's country gets to live through the same experience that I get to live. And I know that like you wildly afraid.
Well, just saying, living in Gaza is nothing like living in Ukraine. Sure, you're both underneath colonial powers, but one, you have pretty much institutional support from the entire Western world. Like, NATO is specifically designed to fight against Russia, so why wouldn't there be systemic support for, like, people fighting against Russia? And the other, you'll get, like, a like online if you post a Palestinian flag. And that's it. You won't even get food from aid groups specifically designed to bring you food in the place where you're starving to death. The humanitarian teams that bring medical aid to people are getting sniped. It's not, I mean, I really feel for her, and no one should have to live through what she's living through. But it is just not the same living in Ukraine right now versus living in Gaza. I'm sorry. If she was a Palestinian, she would still be in Palestine. Like, let's just say that. And I'm not going to criticize her. I don't know what the H3 snark thing was. I do think it's pretty fair to say that if the post was saying that, you know, Ethan's only bringing her on to attack Hasan, I agree with that. I think there's a lot of evidence to support that idea.
I got the same for Ela on October 7th. I got the same for AB. It's like, someone would call it PTSD, but it's a weird feeling that you just get. It's a gut feeling that someone is in danger, and you just feel it. It's like the feeling of not being safe. And like, if you think that I would ever say like, yeah, let's...
And I really don't think anyone should be attacking her. It wasn't really her idea to come on to the show and do this hit piece. And even if it was, like, Ethan's definitely been pushing for this. The first time he brought her on, he was kind of fishing for her to say some anti-Hasan stuff. And it's clear that he brought her on with the intention of her, like, bringing up clips to make Hasan look bad. But I can definitely understand why she would want to talk about this, because they are kind of bad clips from Hasan, and she wants to set the record straight on something that means a lot to her. So I can totally see where she's coming from. And I think if she was doing this like on her own YouTube page, there would be nothing wrong with it. If she was trying to correct some of the mistakes that Hasan's made covering this Ukrainian-Russia war, that would be completely fine. And even in this context, I wouldn't really criticize what she's doing. I think a lot of the criticism lies with kind of the more overarching like lenses that Ethan chooses to look at everything through, and kind of ignoring all of the Palestinian hardships, focusing on all of the personal anti-Semitism that Ethan's experienced in his mind. It's anti-Semitism. And now bringing on people pretty explicitly to attack Hasan. Like, if she did this segment and then Ethan's like, thanks for sharing your story, I'm so glad that you're now in America working with us, and we can't wait to, you know, keep having you being a larger and larger part of the team, bring you on the show now that you're here in America, and having you do this. But the fact that she shares this whole sob story, then it's like, okay, I'm done telling my story. Now let's do the segment where I attack Hasan for what he said. It's like, you can't really make the claim that Ethan's just bringing her on to tell her story at this point. So anyway.
Erase Palestine or like whatever. Like, how would you even like say that? That's insane. Like, I'm completely pro-Palestine. I'm here for these people. I see them. Once October 7th happened, I followed all the pro-Palestinian blogs. I went on their like stories actually, and because that's what support I would need from my country. You don't have to prove to them that you're. But I want to say to stop like whatever you're typing right now. Just like erase it back, please, because like it's not gonna happen. You're not gonna do like two sides or like me sitting by AB and like saying about anything. It's not gonna happen because like I completely support every human on this like earth or whatever. Like, it's too peaceful. Like, not every human. Not the Tucker Carlson one.
I think the H3 snark is like somewhat of a Hasan.
Every single flare is like
I love that criticism of me is from Hasan. That's what Ethan's saying, right? The H3 snark, which is straight up criticism of me, is a Hasan subreddit. And God, it's making me really cringe. It's making me cringe that covering this has made me more of a Redditor. It's such a gross feeling to be like, well, on the H3 subreddit, Destiny fans have been brigading it and making a ton of anti-Hasan posts. But just the fact that Ethan is so heavily reliant on his Reddit and like so involved and in the weeds with it, it's kind of like forced me to check out what's going on in his Reddit, and I just feel so gross, man. I spent way too much time on Reddit these last few weeks. But I do love like Ethan's dedication to being like, well, this Reddit is good, this Reddit's bad, this Reddit's filled with Hasan fans. My Reddit that's filled with Destiny fans, I'm just gonna completely ignore and actually utilize all of the clips that they're sending me.
I'm like, what the fuck?
So like I feel like his community, it leans kind of tanky as like anti-Ukraine.
I'm sorry for going there. I just saw my face.
Yeah, there is no evidence to support that at all. Hasan has consistently... Okay, just one more time. Ethan says Hasan's, like he said point blank, Hasan's community is anti-Ukraine. I need to close out of that. So this is Hasan's official YouTube channel, and I just searched Ukraine. What do we have here? Russia has invaded Ukraine. Ben Shapiro's take on Ukraine is almost okay. Again, this is kind of an example of American conservatives and progressives supporting Ukraine, and the fact that there's like really institutionalized support kind of across the spectrum. Elon Musk threatens to cut Starlink funding for Ukraine. Is that anti-Ukraine? I don't think so. I feel like that's anti-Elon Musk, pro-Ukraine. Ukraine holding strong, but things could get worse. I was wrong about Ukraine. And that's Hasan saying, yeah, I said Russia would never invade. They did. Why is Steven Seagal in Ukraine? Russia attacks nuclear power plant. Should the U.S. get involved with Ukraine? Western media hypocrisy on Ukraine is appalling. Tim Pool is a Russian asset. So this is Hasan criticizing someone else for being anti-Ukraine. Foreign volunteers get a reality check in Ukraine. Is Ukraine winning the war? Are any of these anti-Ukraine? And then we saw this. What actually bad takes on Ukraine look like? What is this Ukraine take? Let's just watch this.
About the conservative critique of war. A lot of people regularly talk about how much money we're sending over to Ukraine, and some of the perspective is valid. But a lot of what conservatives anti-war, because they're just saying that's not a good war to fight. We got a better war to fight. And if you are anti-war, you don't say shit like that. They're not anti-war, they're anti this war. Okay, so remember that. Here it is. Marjorie Taylor Greene says President Trump was right. We should bomb the cartels because they are an international criminal organization murdering our people by lacing deadly fentanyl from China in drugs they illegally sell across our border to U.S. citizens, not Mexico or its great people, the cartels. The Biden admin and U.S. Congress has invested $111+ billion taxpayers' dollars in a war defending the borders of the people of Ukraine. The same admin and Congress ignore our own daily border invasion and the record high number of Mexican cartel fentanyl murders of American.
Anyway, just criticizing criticisms of Ukraine in this video. And this is Hasan's most recent take on Ukraine that I think is interesting. So let's watch this. So the context of this video is it was just released that Tim Pool is being paid millions of dollars to support
Money wasn't 90% of Tim's revenue. I think it was 90% of his revenue for the one entity that he created.
Hey, yo! The enemy of this country, Ukraine.
Hey, yo! What? Yeah! This is awesome. Oh my God. Okay, by the way, $100,000, you would be screaming like that too. $100,000 a week? Don't.
Ukraine.
Bro, this is like math.
Ukraine is our enemy, being funded by the Democrats. I will stress this again.
So just saying, I mean, Ethan's definitely trying to make the case that Hasan is anti-Ukraine here. If they had any clips of Hasan saying anything remotely like this, Ukraine is the enemy of our country, do you think they would not be playing it? Do you think that these Destiny's Redditors would not be sending Ethan clips like this 24/7 if they had them? We'll see the clips that they play, but it is kind of laughably nothing.
One of the greatest enemies of our nation right now is Ukraine.
Bro, this is like mathematically the worst position to arrive at. Like, what do you mean? Like, people say I'm a shill for Russia because I'm always like, bro, we need to do a ceasefire. America's interests in Ukraine are not genuine. All they want is the continuation of war so they can like dump all of their older weapons. Like, ultimately, we need to come to the table and do a ceasefire. Like, I never once would say Ukraine is the enemy of Russia. That's insane. Bro, they got no autonomy in this. I'm sorry. The people on the Democratic Party side that consistently talk about how like, well, this is what the Ukrainians want, are literally just straight up lying. Because if everyone in Ukraine said, no, we don't want to do war, we need to do a ceasefire immediately. We hate being slaughtered. America would still be like, okay, well, you know, what if it was okay for a couple more people to get slaughtered, you know, because we really like the situation right now that we're in currently. We love that you guys have, you know, destroyed half of the Russian artillery. I mean, it wouldn't take much before the CIA literally puts a psychopathic, like rabid right-wing ultra-nationalist in power if Ukraine actually changed trajectory, I think.
Okay. So let's just take a minute here to kind of reassess where we're at. Ethan's trying to make the case that Hasan is anti-Ukraine, and we've watched a few clips of Hasan talking about Ukraine. So what has Hasan said on Ukraine? Well, he's criticized a lot of conservative critiques of the war, and the conservative critiques of the war stem from anything between being pro-Russia because of their Christian nationalist status, that's kind of weird, and being anti-war because we need to secure our borders, we need to actually send these weapons to Canada or free ourselves. So some crazy stuff from conservatives. We haven't really seen any examples of leftists being anti-Ukraine war. And to the extent that we do see kind of like more progressive lefty people being anti-Ukraine throughout the internet in general, we see it as a critique of NATO. And this last clip that we just saw from Hasan is a criticism of NATO. What was his criticism? Well, his criticism was that even if Ukraine wanted to stop fighting, NATO and the countries involved with NATO would probably kind of force them to continue fighting. Hasan's stance on the Ukrainian war, and in all of these clips, has always been pro-Ukrainian people. It's always been in favor of the sovereignty of the Ukrainian people. Even to the extent that he's criticizing NATO, he's doing it in a way of defending Ukrainian sovereignty. His criticism of NATO is that in the hypothetical situation where Ukrainians would actually want to sue for peace with Russia, maybe they're like, okay, well, you can we'll make a peace deal. You leave Ukraine alone. We'll concede that Crimea is now a part of Russia. Let's say that hypothetically happened. Hasan's fear is that NATO would be like, we're really getting a lot out of this proxy war. We're able to unload all of our old weapons that are just rusting away, give them an actual use, and we're completely depleting all of Russia's military status to the point that where Russia is now not only conscripting like young boys and old men, but they're using North Korean troops to send into Ukraine. So Russia's in a very poor state. And what have NATO countries really suffered? Well, they've had to take in a few refugees, and they've been able to unload billions of dollars in military equipment that was just rusting away. So like NATO countries are getting a really good deal out of this, and Hasan recognizes that, and it is like, maybe NATO's getting such a good deal that Ukrainian sovereignty and the will of the Ukrainian people is kind of getting overshadowed because NATO is so war hungry. Hasan's never criticized Ukraine. He's never been pro-Russia in this war. He's never even said we shouldn't support Ukraine. He's just says that we should try to make peace. And he hasn't even said to the point where our support for Ukraine is bad. He's just kind of said it in the hypothetical that if Ukraine wanted to make peace, then NATO would kind of stop them from doing it, which I kind of agree with. But I don't think NATO would actually do a regime change. I think Ukraine is too much of an important ally to destabilize it to that extent. And I don't think that the United States and other NATO countries are that itching to get rid of their military equipment to feed their military industrial complex to actually like do a regime change in Ukraine and kind of expand this proxy war into a more global war against Russia. But again, Ethan's trying to make the case that Hasan is anti-Ukraine and that leftists are anti-Ukraine, and all we've seen is from leftists either being pro-Ukraine or criticizing NATO and still being pro-Ukraine. And all of the actual anti-Ukrainian, pro-Russian takes have been from conservatives, from conservative standpoints. And what are these conservative standpoints? We're spending too much money. Russia is a fascist, Christian nationalist country. We should support them because of that. We are letting in too many refugees. We don't like these refugees. They're being welfare queens. That's an anti-immigration stance that we see from conservatives all across the world. We need to focus on ourselves. That's also kind of like a nationalist, isolationist view that a lot of conservatives have. And so this claim that Hasan's fans are being anti-Ukraine, pro-Russia, just really doesn't hold any water. And it's kind of laughable that Ethan Klein is actually trying to make the case that that is what's happening. So I think we did enough covering Hasan's
But again,
takes
this proves
on
the point that I was making.
And we can go back to this video. Almost, I'm not going to say we're almost done. We have a long way to go.
Like on recommendation page.
That's pretty nuts. That is pretty nuts.
Yeah.
It's like, where the fuck did they
And it's like,
that? But fuck them. Who cares about
yeah.
that?
Hold on.
I
I'm just going to rewind this. I'm going to try to talk a little bit
every single player is like Hasan Abi fan. I'm like, what the fuck?
So like I feel like his community, it leans kind of tanky as like anti-Ukraine.
I'm sorry for going there. I just saw my face like on recommendation page.
That's pretty nuts. That is pretty nuts.
Yeah.
It's like, where the fuck did they
And it's like,
that? But fuck them. Who cares about
yeah.
them?
I just wanted, yeah, that's basically it.
What's the Ukrainians' opinion on Zelensky?
I mean, there's always
speed this up a little bit.
Ukraine is an incredibly
I'm just gonna
unstable
speed it up
country in
until
terms of
we actually
politics,
get to
and it
stuff
has been
that I
like
wanna
that for the last 30 years because we've just became independent. We're just gaining our access, and once again, all the previous parties who've been like leading the country were extremely pro-Russian, funded by Russia. Everything was like money pulling into their pockets, just doing any anti-Ukrainian laws before, even like before Zelensky, before war, before everything. It's like a long-term plan that has been going forever, and people are pro-Zelensky, but like, of course, it's a democracy. Some people are arguing with him. Some people do not agree with his decisions, and it's okay. It's like it's happening in every country. Like 50% are voting for Trump or like whatever.
So you guys got to be on the edge of your seat with this coming election. Because if Trump wins, that would be a disaster for Ukraine, I think.
I wanted to encourage everyone not to vote because I know that our audience is
Trump
extremely
is a
progressive.
fascist. He loves
Well, I believe you.
fascists.
But please talk to your like weird brother or like weird sister who never goes to vote, or like they say whatever. That's the moment that this weekend you can talk to them and like persuade them to go vote. I don't say like go vote for Kamala. You can vote for whoever you want, but like please go vote for Kamala.
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually have one more thing. Am I being too late?
That's okay. What you want to watch some of the clips? You prepared?
Yeah, I have.
Oh no. Okay. How long has this stream been going? Do I want to break it up into two sections? It's fine. It's fine. We'll just push through.
I have like a really weird statement, and I know that I said it before on the pod that I'm not a Hasan supporter anymore.
Okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to watch her. We're going to let her read off her letter, respond to that letter, and then I'm going to cut it off. And for the next video, I'm going to go over the clips that she plays of Hasan. So let's get that started.
And I'm definitely not. But I want to prove to people that I'm not a Hasan supporter just cause there has been like a divorce or anything.
Just cause.
I found an email that I wanted to send you a year ago. It's a note that I wrote, and it's from September 14th, 2023. And I just want to read it.
So she said this is an email that she read, or that she wrote. I don't think she actually ended up sending it, but she wrote this email from September 14th, 2023. So a year ago, I think she was already working for Ethan at this time.
Out loud because it's about Hasan, and then I'm going to show you three clips that I've got. Sorry about that. I'm going to be really quick. I wrote, I'm sorry for bringing it up, but I just cannot leave it behind. Today's episode literally made me cry. I understand that I have a lot of PTSD, but to see somebody discuss war and humanity issues so ignorantly was some kind of a Black Mirror segment. I just went to rewatch one more time just to make sure that I heard everything right. The point about US propaganda, because Hasan was saying that the only reason why Americans care about Ukrainian war is just because it's propaganda. the leftovers in itself can and would be considered a form of propaganda. It's one thing if Hasan would say something like this, drinking a beer with his friends, but you guys are one of the most influential channels today, and your POVs influence young minds and perspectives on certain points. The war that has been going on in Ukraine for the last 9 years, 10 now, is extremely dependent on YouTube channels, Telegram commentary, and even streams now. That's a new war where every social media post shifts people's perspectives. It has been this way for the past 15 years. Euromaidan in 2013 started because of one Facebook post, not because of TV. I was there 10 years ago as a 19-year-old who just read about it on Twitter. I saw how people arranged streams around to tell the truth. I saw how Russian bloggers were bought one by one to say that not to say Putin is the best and let's vote for Putin. They were simply saying everything is not black and white, which we can see now. Everything like has two sides to it or like whatever, because this is the most insane propaganda you could do, just blurring the lines of what's good and what's bad. YouTube is the new propaganda, and I really hope you guys feel much more power than you actually have I hope you guys feel how much power you actually have every Thursday to influence a whole generation. Normal people don't care about foreign policies, that's a quote. Probably not, but they sure thing care about where their taxes go to, and they discuss it every single day. There is so much hatred towards refugees in every country that's actually sponsored by Russian authorities, and they're trying to spread it. If the US stopped doing propaganda, then Russian propaganda would just take over the media. And that's my main point. If you stop talking about voting for Kamala, someone's going to talk about voting for Trump. If you stop talking about Ukraine, someone is going to talk about Russia. There's only like streaming space in between, and we did see it this year with like so much Russian paid stuff everywhere. Tim Pool, shout out, Tucker Carlson,
Tim Pool, that's
whatever,
what we
like
covered.
Peterson guy. Thank you so much for all your money. Good talking points. Fuck you. And then
Tucker Carlson,
yes,
also
normal people's
pro-Russia.
opinions won't affect the war.
Funnily enough, two of these people that she lists as blatantly pro-Russia are conservative.
But it will affect refugees, adaptations in their new homes and countries. I just want good talking points, fuck you. And then yes, normal people's opinions won't affect the war, but it will affect refugees, adaptations in their new homes and countries. I just watched the video where a Ukrainian taxi driver was beaten by Polish guys just because he's Ukrainian, and this is in the country that supports Ukraine the most in the world. You can only imagine how much xenophobia is all around the world right now towards Ukrainian, and how many cases I know of 6.2 million people who fled their country. This is actually 1.5 times the whole population of whatever, like, doesn't matter. I wrote Georgia because my previous point was about Georgia, but I erased it right now. They are learning new languages and looking for the next step. Just imagine someone during any wartime being hated because they're a refugee. And my main point is, you can help right now any Hispanic refugees, and you can just go and create spaces for them right here in US to make their life less miserable, to help them get new jobs, to help them learn English. It's not that like hard to do in your like little counties and your little cities, and you can be a part of that, and you can stop saying that they're like wasting your taxes, and you can actually help them build your country that you're living in. I actually stumbled across a couple of TikToks before doing research with Hasan's thoughts about Ukraine from February 2022 plus. I started watching his streams the past year, and every time he speaks about Ukraine, his every single take sounds like the first step to Russian propaganda, which is just ridiculous. Every time I hear there are Nazis in the Ukrainian army, or that could have been Ukraine, the most ridiculous one is Crimea take, which was a sure trigger for today because he was discussing Crimea that day for all of this. I really wish I could talk to him and not whine to you about it, and that's actually true. Not whine to 60,000 like, or like whoever watches it.
He would never.
But he will never watch it. He will never make any commentary about it, and I know it. That's why I didn't do a whole presentation, because like, who cares? And like, why should you watch it? Because like, he never responds to it.
I remember what he said about Crimea. He said more like Crimea River or something.
Yes. Spoiler. That's the goal of every Ukrainian influencer and politician, to not be.
I love how the thing they get the most pissed off about is a pun that Hasan makes. I guess it's a funny pun, so it would be memorable, but it's like, oh, let's not talk about his actual view on it. I mean, to be fair, they do talk about it later, but that's the first thing that comes to Ethan's mind.
Forgotten, just like it happened in 2015, right after invasion of Donetsk, Luhansk, and Crimea, and they fight for it every day. That's what I wrote like a year ago, and it's still like, whenever I found that note, because I was preparing to talk about something today, I was like, okay, this is still relevant. This is still the same exact shit. And I want to, I sent the link to Dan. I want to preface that I did
Okay, so this was a letter that Galia wrote in September 14th, 2023. And in the letter, it said that, she got really mad at today's episode. So we can take a look at this. Streamed 1 year ago. And if this works, oh no, what did I do? Clicked on the playlist. So this was September 14th, 2023. So this is the episode in question. And let's cover this.
Opposite direction.
Let's actually go in and see what triggered her. So I was taking some notes about what she was saying. She says that she was very concerned about the idea that about kind of how flippantly Hasan was treating war and humanitarian issues. She made the point that Hasan and Ethan Ethan's show is propaganda, and that the support for the war is kind of dependent on social media, and these people are social media. And then she was also kind of making more points about how refugees can be supported. But let's actually get into the conversation. That kind
independence for Taiwan. You heard it here from Hasan.
Because remember, like the overwhelming majority of people living in Taiwan are still Han Chinese. Therefore, despite the fact that it's a separate country, it's still like the same people. A delicate political conversation, but one that currently the current system benefits both.
And so, if China takes military action against Taiwan.
So this was a whole China versus Taiwan discussion.
Does no one care about Yemen?
Hasan and Ethan were having, and then it kind of went into a question of propaganda, and then you get more into the Ukraine versus Russia.
The takes in chat, how many people are like, just the polarization of this topic. It's fucking insane.
Well, of course there's going to be polarization on the topic because the American media has been gearing people to be across the board like vicious, no matter what, to any foreign adversary, China being the main foreign adversary now. So people are going to be very passionate in their defense and start saying, we care about the people in Taiwan. You're not talking about the people in Taiwan. You don't
so
care about them.
It's the media. If it weren't for the media's propaganda, people would not be siding with Taiwan.
Yeah. I mean, think about it this way. Why the fuck does no one care about Yemen? You know what I mean? Why? Because Saudi Arabia is the one, our ally, Saudi Arabia is the one doing the genocide in Yemen. And you never see people get dispassionate about Yemen. I think people get dispassionate about Syria.
I think Taiwan has more relevance to the United States, like in terms of economical and social.
Yeah, that was developed.
Well, that's only natural that people would care more about something that affects them more. I don't think Yemen. Yeah, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I just don't think Yemen affects.
But it's still.
So one reason why the American media wasn't talking about Yemen is because it was ostensibly our ally in Saudi Arabia doing a genocide in Yemen, and the United States supports Saudi Arabia because of oil. And again, Americans care about Taiwan because the media talks about Taiwan. And why does the media talk about Taiwan? It's because the U.S. has interest in maintaining good relationships with Taiwan because of the important manufacturing that Taiwan gives. It's also a strategic ally to have in case of conflict with China because it's so close to China, and America is obviously trying to always like angle to get these kind of almost a client state, kind of similar to Israel in key strategic locations against the enemies that they see in the global stage. Kind of similar with Ukraine. If Ukraine is has really good relations with the United States, again, we kind of have this spot where we like have this key geopolitical country because they're bordering an enemy of the United States. So again, we can see these examples all over the place where the media is getting people to care about certain things because it's in the interest of the American government.
There's still people that are being mercilessly slaughtered, whereas no one is being slaughtered in Taiwan in a similar capacity, and yet there are way more passionate because,
I'm not saying it's
like
right or
you said,
wrong. I mean,
it is designed to have this kind of.
And you think that if the only reason people care about Ukraine is because of the media?
Absolutely, 100%.
Nobody would care.
Did
anybody care about Georgia?
Yeah, that's a great
Probably,
question.
I don't know.
No one gave a shit about Georgia. That's crazy.
I love Ethan's pattern of just like making stuff up that he has no idea about. Oh yeah, probably cared about people cared about Georgia. I don't know. Did you care about Georgia, Ethan? You didn't give a shit about Georgia, but you care about Ukraine.
Hold on. Well, I mean, what about in Europe? They seem to care about Ukraine a lot.
It's the similar principle. Media is still media everywhere around the world.
I mean,
it plays
Ukraine
a very significant role in people's lives.
Hold on. Ukraine borders Europe And I mean, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but Georgia is not really in such a geographically, strategically important location as Ukraine.
Okay.
Well, I'm just explaining why people might care more about Ukraine than Georgia. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying
Still
why.
people. It's the people
I'm
that
not
are being
saying it's not
ruthlessly
people.
slaughtered.
I'm just saying because your theory is that the support for Ukraine and Taiwan is essentially manufactured, that it wouldn't exist. It shouldn't exist.
I'm not saying it shouldn't exist. I'm simply stating
said
that.
that, yeah.
I'm simply stating that
It's manufactured. People only care
tremendous
about it
amount-
because they've been tricked to caring about it.
It's not tricked, but dude, like,
I love this. Okay, so let's just break this down to make it really simple. The American media and just media in general that has these kind of entrenched platforms. They're on cable TV. They have access to American important figures, and a lot of these important figures are in the government. The American, I'll just stick with American, but just know that this takes place all over the world. Every country has a form of this, but the American media has to maintain certain relationships with American government because they make their business by reporting on what's happening in by what the American government is doing. So it's important that they maintain this relationship. A lot of times, this will result in the media reporting what the American government wants them to report. So if they get a tip from someone who's like, okay, we're going to talk about Russia invading Ukraine because us as a government are very focused on this, naturally, if the media is reporting on what the government's doing, the media is going to be very focused on this. So it's a bit of a give and take. The American government is able to do things because the media manufactures support for it. And I'll explain kind of the manufacturing support later. And the media manufactures the support because the American government has an interest in it. So it's almost like a chicken or the egg thing, just this symbiotic relationship between media and government. So how does the media manufacture support on things? Well, obviously, they just talk about it. If they're going to talk about how inhumane the tragedies are in Ukraine when Russia invades, people are going to simply see that. That doesn't mean that people's personal support for Ukraine is inauthentic or manufactured. What Hasan means when he says that support is manufactured, that the media manufactures support, is on a nationwide and global scale. What the media chooses to cover will influence what people care about. So we definitely saw this with Ukraine, where the media was covering Russia's buildup of military, and then they were covering the initial invasion, and they were covering the war effort, and we saw an explosion of Ukrainian flags. It's not that every single person driving through the highway is, super keyed in on geopolitical happenings in Eastern Europe and Russian aggression. It's not that they care about that by themselves. They're seeing it on the media. They're seeing it on social media as well. And they actually have a sincere care for seeing Russia, get rid of this imperial power that's invading them. And that doesn't mean people are insincere when they put up a "We Stand with Ukraine" sign in their front yard or a Ukrainian flag in their car window. They're very sincere when they're doing that. But the fact that the media is covering it kind of makes that a support nationwide. We do also see this in support for Palestine. And this is kind of a unique case because we had media that was so anti-Palestinian, but because of kind of the grassroots groundswell of support for Palestinians as the genocide got worse and worse and worse, we've seen the media almost get forced back into being not really pro-Palestinian, but kind of portraying a neutral light on the situation. And the media has almost been forced, like the mainstream media that has these government connections has almost been forced to cover Palestinian voices more and more, and stories that kind of humanize Palestinians more and more as the genocide's just gotten so bad. And we're almost kind of seeing a reverse where it's the people causing the media to shift, and then the media is shifting, and then hopefully we're seeing some government shifting, which has been kind of a really unique case, because for sure, what was the standard? Well, the standard was that the American government was supporting Israel, thus the media was supporting Israel. So really interesting here. And Ethan talking about how, like, I'll just play this, but Ethan talking about how the media is tricking people into caring about this is, again, just refracting the idea that's going in his left ear, coming out his right, or coming out his mouth just all jarbled up, man. Ethan has very poor, not only media literacy, but comprehension skills, I would say.
Normal people don't think about foreign policy. Are you saying that you don't think that normal people's opinions about like international matters are shaped by what they see on the news and what's prioritized?
I'll give you a better example.
Of course it is.
Hold on, because I'm being double teamed now, so I need to speak.
Okay.
Of course it is. But this implication that you're like, if you say nobody cares about Taiwan or Ukraine because of the media, it implies that, you know.
That's the exact opposite of what Hasan said. Hasan said that people care about Taiwan and Ukraine because of the media, not that nobody cares about Taiwan and Ukraine because of the media. He's saying nobody cares about Yemen because the media is not focused on Yemen. That's what Hasan is saying here.
The support for those two countries, or care for those two countries, is like, manufactured. That it's really not sincere. That's what it sounds like.
You jumped to that. Nobody
I'm
said
sorry.
that.
Okay, so again, just to directly respond to Ethan's point, support can be manufactured and it can also be sincere. That's what Ethan isn't understanding. People can have sincere support for Ukraine, and simultaneously the support nationwide for Ukraine is manufactured by the media. And again, it's just kind of ignorance from Ethan. Like he's centering himself in this. He can't really step aside and be like, okay, well, we're talking about media manufacturing support on a global scale. And he seems to think that Hasan is implying that we shouldn't actually be supporting Ukraine, and the media is tricking us into supporting Ukraine. But somehow support for Ukraine is unjust, it's an unrighteous cause, and thus we shouldn't support it. That's kind of what Ethan is saying. That's what Ethan thinks Hasan is saying. And really, Hasan's just saying, we care about Ukraine because the media is talking about it. That doesn't preclude support for Ukraine from being righteous and just. It's just like a commentary on the way that media gets people to support certain causes.
Yeah, I am saying that.
He is saying that.
I'm saying that the support for the overwhelming majority of Americans, for any country that the United States of America has a genuine interest in, is manufactured in either.
Again, it can be manufactured and authentic.
Direction. It can be manufactured carelessness and inconsideration, like being inconsiderate and ruthlessly violent at certain points, which is the example I was going to use with 9/11 and what we did post 9/11. Or it could be manufactured in the other direction, where it's like, this is the just war. This is the just war that we have to fight, like we did in Vietnam originally, when there was need to generate popular support for whatever kind of action America consistently takes. Now,
I'm not denying that propaganda exists.
Yeah,
but I am saying that, like, the comparison of Ukraine to Georgia is not apples to oranges. That's all I'm saying. It's not.
Okay, so now Ethan's kind of gotten himself into the position. Again, he doesn't really know Hasan's position. He's not able to comprehend it. And he's trying to say that people care about, like, this is the position that Ethan has now found himself defending. He's going to try to make the argument that people care about Russia's invasion of Ukraine because it actually affects them, whereas people do not care about Russia's invasion of Georgia. And when I say people, I'm just going to say, let's say, Polish people, because Ethan was making the claim that, Europeans, it affects Europeans. That's something Ethan said. So Polish people care about Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and they don't care about Russia's invasion of Poland. Once again, Ethan doesn't actually have any evidence to back this up. I'm sure there was a lot of Polish people that cared about Russia's invasion of Georgia. Sorry, I think I misspoke there. Russia's invasion of Georgia. And I think also this is evidence to support Hasan's viewpoint that people just care about stuff because the media is covering it. Do you think Polish media wouldn't cover Russia's invasion of Georgia? I'm not going to take the time now, but I'm sure I can find hundreds, thousands of Polish media clips talking about Russia's invasion of Georgia. It's ridiculous to think that Polish people wouldn't care about Russia, who's like, what, 1,000 miles away from Poland, invading a sovereign country. So what is Ethan's argument here? He's saying like, oh, well, Georgia's like 500 miles east of Ukraine, so when Russia invades that, we can't hear the rumbling of tanks. But when Russia invades Ukraine, it's 500 miles closer, and individual isolated from the media. The media is irrelevant in this situation. It's just people walking on the street, going out to eat their Polish sausages and to beat their wives. They stop mid-strike and they like feel the rumbling of Russian tanks, and all of a sudden, independent for media, they're like, Russia's invading. We need to get a mass support for the invasion of Ukraine. But those tank rumblings wouldn't be felt if Russia was inside of Georgia. Pretty stupid stuff from Ethan here. Like people get information from social media. Like even if it's word of mouth, it's still from social media. There's not going to be word of mouth going from the eastern regions of Ukraine all the way to Poland in like a day. It's really stupid stuff that Ethan's talking about here.
What what do you mean by this? That
Ukraine borders like mainland Russia or Europe.
Okay.
Europe cares a lot about it.
Okay.
So again, he's trying to make the claim that it's like just geographically more relevant to Poland. It's pretty funny.
I would say that it's probably more. I would say that in Europe, there's probably more of a not controversy necessarily, but it's a more divisive issue in I think Europe than it is in America, most likely.
It's also like not the best precedent when like tyrants start land grabbing in Europe. Generally,
I love that. So Ethan's trying to say that, oh, well, people do have a sincere care because A, it's on their border, and B, they're worried about the precedent of Russia land grabbing. So why wouldn't they care about Georgia then, Ethan? And also, why do this argument could have some relevance to Europeans? Why would Americans care at all? Like that's Hasan's also saying that Americans care about Ukraine because of the media. And again, this whole conversation is stupid. Ethan's just not comprehending what Hasan's saying. It's not that people aren't correct to support Ukraine. It's just that they are supporting Ukraine because of the media.
I don't disagree with that. I agree with you. I think that
and so I understand why people don't like
completely unjustifiable. And it's also, even if you're like pro-Russia, pro-Vladimir Putin, anti-NATO, right? Even if you're all of those things, it is a laughably idiotic thing to do, because all you've done is now galvanize NATO support in Europe and justified it. Because that was the entire reason for NATO's existence, is to stop the USSR, stop communism from thriving. And obviously, Russia is a very different country than the USSR was, and is no longer ideologically aligned with communism at all. It is a state that Western capitalists basically redesigned and propped up oligarchs, including people like Vladimir Putin. So, despite all of that, it's still utilized as a protection racket that you basically justified its existence of by doing such an unimaginably cruel, inhumane, unjustifiable act, invading Ukraine. So it's a strategic blunder, even if you're like pro-Russia.
I do think that I just think people are capable of caring about it without.
Well, I mean, I care
being
about
like,
it. I care about it.
People sincerely care about it, even though you think it's unfair that people didn't care as much about Georgia.
Bro, that's such an insane summary of Hasan's positions. Like, that's what you think Hasan said, that it's unfair that people didn't care about Georgia? Hasan's making the argument that people didn't care about Georgia because A, the media didn't care about Georgia, and then by extension, the United States government and like NATO didn't really care about Georgia. Even though I would argue they should have cared about Georgia, because again, what Ethan's saying is undermining his own premise that Russia invading Georgia is setting up a land grabbing precedent. And he's like, oh yeah, but he completely ignores it in the case of Georgia and only talks about how Polish people would care about Russia invading Ukraine because it sets a precedent. but they wouldn't care about Russia invading Georgia because somehow that didn't set a precedent of Russia being a land-grabbing imperialist nation.
That's my point.
It's not necessarily just not caring about Georgia. My opinion on this is that we, as a nation here in America and all around the world, are not immune to propaganda.
No.
As a matter of fact, every piece of information that we analyze has a great impact on our decision-making process, and therefore,
like he's gotta identify the miscommunication between himself and Ethan, and Ethan's really like getting upset that because he thinks Hasan's saying that you shouldn't support Ukraine, that people are just tricked into supporting it. And Hasan's pretty weird, interpersonally. I do wish that he would just kind of, really take his time to break this down with Ethan.
Doing a full media blitz on any particular issue is usually going to yield these kinds of results and this kind of support, which without that kind of media blitz would not exist. Does that make sense?
Again, I'm not denying that propaganda exists and that we're all, influence.
And the example I was going to use was our justification for the invasion of Afghanistan and the invasion of Iraq. These were both unjustifiable wars, in my opinion. The war on terror was across the board, wholesale, ruthless, cruel, led to millions of people dying, led to tens of millions of people being destabilized, and we're still living in the rubble of that kind of cruel and unusual action. And it was championed by a majority of the American population. And until the past couple of years, what
does that have to do with Ukraine being invaded by Russia?
Where do you think that kind of attitude came from?
Okay,
where do you think that just?
It doesn't have anything to do with Ukraine and Russia. That's kind of the point that Hasan's talking about. He's just illustrating mechanisms to create support among the population, specifically the American population, through the American media. Oh my God.
Vacation came from. There was $1 billion industry.
Same thing, man. Ukraine was invaded by Russia.
No, it is exactly the same thing.
It's literally a tyrant grabbing land in Europe.
I agree with what you're saying.
God,
my point.
Ethan's so dumb, bro. Just listen to Hasan. Hasan was even talking about how he's giving an example of how Americans got on board with an unjust cause because of the media. So Hasan's saying, if the media can manufacture support for an unjust cause, then of course they can manufacture support for defending Ukraine against an invading country that also is much bigger than Ukraine. This is everything Americans want, right? This is the Rocky moment. That's why we get so many guys who are kind of war touristy, getting up in their paramilitary gear and shipping themselves over to Ukraine to try to fight Russia. This is literally a fucking American movie.
My point is that
propaganda exists. Yeah, I know.
No, my point is that Americans think that they are independent thinkers, and yet they are motivated into believing things, no matter what it is. It can be a just cause.
I agree that
it can be a just cause in the situation where you're supporting Ukraine and Ukrainian independence, which is an independent nation state. You know what I mean? It's been an independent nation state in the aftermath of the dissolution of the USSR. It's been an independent nation state. You can't just turn around and be like, all right, it's mine now, right? I agree with that. And that it can be seen as a just war, an understandable war. It's not even a war that the Ukrainian people wanted, right? But having said that, the American support, the full-throated support, is absolutely
It doesn't seem like there's full-throated support. There's a lot of people that don't support it. There's a very diverse opinion of
if you looked at polls in the original invasion, the amount of support
there's a lot of conservative people who are Putin simps, and then there's also a bunch of lefties, I don't mean that derogatory.
Those aren't real lefties.
Who aren't who are like the guy we were speaking to, the communist professor.
Richard Wolff?
Yeah, who's kind of.
Okay, so Hasan's saying that there's media's manufacturing support, and Ethan's saying, oh, well, there's not that much support. Bro, what are you doing? Okay, we can look this up, but if we're going to talk about lefties being anti-Ukraine, it's pretty much just people saying oh, I'm communist, so I support Russia, which is completely insane. Basically fascists, but from the perspective of Russia.
He people like him are also very anti-Ukraine in general.
I don't know his entire perspective,
he doesn't seem very bullish.
I don't think you can be pro. If you are offering even critical support to Russia, or not Russia, but Vladimir Putin in general, I don't think I don't think you're doing the right thing.
I don't
think
know
that
what's
you've
his
got,
position because he didn't really flesh it
Yeah,
out.
I think you're lost in the sauce. I think you're lost in the sauce in the sense that
me or him.
No, like anyone that is like, oh no, Vladimir Putin did the right thing. He has to have this.
I don't think people are
righteous
saying
conquest.
that. I think what I hear is like, Ukraine, Zelensky is also, you know, a shit starter, and it's their problem that we shouldn't get involved in.
I don't know. I think there's a lot. There are people who like claim to be socialist or even communist that are like, you know, defending Vladimir Putin, but they're.
I mean, again, Ethan's just jumping from point to point. At first he's like getting kind of angry that Hasan is. I mean, at least his understanding of what Hasan is saying is that Hasan's implying that, you know, it's not a correct cause, or not like a just cause to support Ukraine. And then Ethan's like, well, there's some people that don't support Ukraine. It's like, okay, we're still just talking about how people support causes. In general.
They're marginal.
What, Dan? You seem to think that the Ukraine war isn't something America should get involved in.
When did I ever say that? What are you
just
talking
based on what you were saying about Georgia.
Bro, holy shit, Ethan's so fucking stupid.
No, we were having a discussion about how media shapes narratives in the United States. And I was saying that, again, I'm not talking about in Europe, I'm not talking about in the rest of the world, in the United States.
What? What are you talking about? I never said that.
The Russian
It's like, dude, Ethan just hears whatever he wants to hear.
invasion of Georgia was a non-story. Nobody gave a shit here.
But it's different.
And
it is different. There's difference.
It was a sovereign nation that Russia invaded.
Because it doesn't. It's not. It doesn't have the same proximity. Or
it was like 500 miles. Okay, I gotta look this up. How many fucking? I'm gonna play this.
Same importance within as Ukraine, I think.
Right, but we're talking past each other. Like that.
I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not,
Ukraine is more important to the United States strategically. That's why it gets attention. We're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. Well, okay. I know people are influenced by the media.
Right, but you were saying you think that people, you know,
are allowed to care about things genuinely.
Nobody's saying
that you're not allowed to. I mean,
not allowed to. But Hasan was saying.
What was I saying?
That it's a manufactured.
Okay, so from Ukraine to Georgia. Specifically, I don't know specifically what city, but it would be about 1,200 miles. So, oh yeah, it's like 2,000 kilometers further away. So people, obviously Europeans don't care about it. It's 2,000 kilometers away. Why would we care? We're having a good party.
No, we were having a discussion about how media shapes narratives in the United States. And I was saying that, again, I'm not talking about in Europe, I'm not talking about in the rest of the world. In the United States, the Russian invasion of Georgia was a non-story. Nobody gave a shit here.
But it's different. It is different. There's difference.
It was a sovereign nation that Russia invaded.
Because it doesn't. It's not. It doesn't have the same proximity or the same importance within as Ukraine, I think.
Right, but
bro, Ethan literally said that Georgia doesn't have the same importance as Ukraine. How are we not getting like Georgians coming in here criticizing Ethan's take on this? Ethan said like straight up just worse shit than what Hasan's saying. Hasan's saying people don't care about Georgia because the American media doesn't care about Georgia. Ethan's like, oh no, you're wrong. People don't care about Georgia because it's not important. That's actually what Ethan's saying. And then we get a letter criticizing Hasan for his analysis of the media and how the American media manufactures consent.
We're talking past each other. Like that.
I'm not.
Yeah, Ukraine is more important to the United States strategically. That's why it gets attention. We're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
But he's not saying the same thing. Ethan is saying that Ukraine is more important to Europeans than Georgia is. Not to European countries, but to the people on the ground. They have a more like personal importance to Ukraine than they do to Georgia. Because, you know, Ukraine's 2,000 kilometers closer to Europe than Georgia is. Crazy shit. Oh, and it sets the precedent of land grabbing.
Okay.
Like Russia invading Georgia somehow didn't set that precedence.
We're
I know people are influenced by the media.
Right, but you were saying you think that people, you know,
are allowed to care about things genuinely.
Nobody's saying that
you're not allowed to. I mean,
not allowed to. But Hasan was saying.
What was I saying?
That it's a manufactured support.
It absolutely is.
Yeah, and
that is something that the U.S. media does. They manufacture support for U.S. foreign policy.
You were saying I jumped to conclusions.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that all U.S. foreign policy is bad, but I think it is unquestionably true that the U.S. media crafts people's
Of course.
Yeah, it crafts the narrative.
So what is the disagreement then? Like, what if maybe I'm not using
there's the implication that support for Ukraine or Taiwan is not authentic.
Okay, again, what Ethan means by authentic is that, you know, it's not correct, it's not right, it's not the just thing to do. You shouldn't. So he's mad because he thinks that Hasan and his producer are implying that you should not support Taiwan and you should not support Ukraine. And that's not what they're saying. In fact, sometimes U.S. foreign policy is actually good. I would say the support for Ukraine is a good thing. And the fact that the media manufactured support for it, sometimes the support they manufacture is correct. The support they manufacture for Israel, not correct. The support they manufacture for invading Iraq and Afghanistan, not correct. The support they manufacture for supporting Ukraine and supporting Taiwan in this weird will they, won't they with China, kind of correct in both of these instances. NATO, it's not that bad of an idea. They've done some bad things, but like NATO is essentially a formal solidification of the will of America, like the foreign policy European will of America. And sometimes they do some good things in the sense of, you know, stopping these border states that are next to Russia from getting invaded. Kind of good.
Right, that you're purely falling for U.S. propaganda. That's not necessarily true.
I do agree with that, yeah.
And then you, Dan, said...
I don't think that
I was
the examples I use, and the examples I use are always like, America has, 800 military bases all around the planet. We have our hands in everyone's pockets, right? And there's active conflict happening everywhere around the planet all the time, and the United States is involved in it. If you are not thinking about it, if you're not thinking about something happening specifically, that is because, for the most part, the media has not covered it. For the most part, the media is...
All right, I'm over it. Let's move on.
And I think that
I don't want to talk about it anymore.
That is deliberate. That is
rage quitting. And then just
by design.
It's like just not even fun to watch probably at this point or talk about.
Okay.
So pretty much Ethan just rage quit. Like he was incapable of understanding what Hasan and his producer Dan were saying. And he, instead of trying to actually talk it through with Hasan, he just kind of quit. And one more time, let's just run back this Charlie Kirk clip because I think it's pretty relevant.
I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Give us the fucking hot takes, Charlie. Oh, he doesn't even care about the southern border. Yeah, dude, I know. It's fucking, he totally. He hasn't Joe Biden hasn't fucking killed enough Haitian migrants in his administration. So that's, we got to deal with that, dude. What the fuck, right?
I'm more worried about how the cartels are deliberately trying to infiltrate our country than a dispute 5,000 miles away, cities we can't pronounce, places that most Americans can't find on a map. Now, I'm not defending the actions of dictators halfway across the world. What I'm saying...
Okay, so how do you think that, the majority... I would say, the vast majority of Americans were in Charlie Kirk's shoes up until the media started covering Ukraine. How people don't know about Donetsk or Kyiv. People still refer to Ukraine as the Ukraine, even after all of this media coverage. How does Ethan think people go from being like, that's 5,000 miles away? I've heard my liberal granddaughter at university talking about it. I don't care. I can't even pronounce these things. I don't know where it is on the map. How does Ethan think people go from that to being like, oh yeah, go Ukraine, and carrying Ukrainian flags around? People don't even know what the Ukrainian flag was until Russia invaded. So again, just examples of how the media actually manufactures support for people. And just to go back to Galia's letter, just the points that she was making about the idea that Hasan and Ethan are running a propaganda show. Of course they are. Hasan would openly admit that he does propaganda. Everyone in media does propaganda by choosing who and what they cover. Again, Hasan never said that support for Ukraine was bad, only that it was manufactured. And, I think Galia would agree with that if she was actually talking with Hasan. But the way that Ethan was pushing back against it, pretty much setting up this false dichotomy where if the support is manufactured, then it cannot be authentic and righteous. Hasan never said that. And she was kind of picking up on those general vibes. So because of that, she was kind of getting very angry. And just looking at more of my notes, she's basically like, xenophobia exists. You need to put out messaging that you should support Ukraine and support Ukrainian refugees, which is kind of funny because, again, most of the anti-Ukrainian, all of the anti-Ukrainian takes are coming from conservatives, especially when it comes to immigration. And you can see these conservative takes on Ukrainians coming in, and you can see these conservative takes on other immigrant groups coming in, such as the Haitians. And she was talking about how, like, you can work to make your country kind of a safe place for refugees to come in. That's what leftists are trying to do, and Hasan has never said that you shouldn't do that. So, oh my god, my brain's getting a little bit fried covering all this shit. This was the introduction. All of this was the introduction, and now we're going to get into the actual clips that Ethan got Galia to bring onto this show. And they're going to cover it. They're going to get into Crimea. They're going to get into general support for Ukraine. And they're going to get into a lot of very kind of difficult stuff to parse through. Like, Crimea, was it ethnically cleansed? Does it belong to Ukraine, Russia, the Tatars, Turkey? And then all of these Hasan clips. So we've still got a long way to go. But I'm going to end this so I don't have like a 5-hour long video. Thanks for watching. End of part 1. Catch you on part 2.